All right, so welcome to the Outsiders. Alex, you are in Miami Beach or something? Like what am I looking at here?
I'm I'm near Jacksonville, so I'm in Florida. You're close. I mean, it all looks the same on this coast. You start from Miami and you make it all the way up to about northern Florida, and it all looks the
So
same.
what's the deal? You couldn't afford to go to real Florida, or you're like too cheap?
I'm at a wedding. One of my best friends is getting married tomorrow, and so our rehearsal dinner is in about 45 minutes. I'll have to get ready for it soon. So really time this one superbly.
They're getting married in Jacksonville? Nobody gets married in Jacksonville.
Well, it's in Palm Coast. Technically, it's Palm Coast. It's like some island near St. Augustine. So I didn't pick the venue. I just showed up.
All right, I'm cool with that. So, by the way, thank you again for dedication to our nascent podcast that you hauled your microphone and your studio headphones to what looks like a balcony in Florida. Like freaking hero.
I'm here. I'm doing it for the pod. I'll take one for the team. And Chris didn't even have the audacity to show up today. So, well, you guys have recorded the last two episodes without me. I think for those listening, we're probably going to move to a model where two of us out of the three show up every single week, and we have a one-on-one argument, debate, discussion, conversation, whatever you want to call it. And so there's always one man down. There's always two of us, and that way we can sort of switch in depending on the week and you know who's available. So I wasn't really that available today, but Chris is less available, so here I am. Michael's not doing anything on a Friday evening anyway, so no worries there.
Oh, how dare you? How dare you?
And today I thought it would be fun, or maybe not that fun, to talk about let's talk about SF crime and just everything that's going on right now in San Francisco and everything that's been fueled from the recent murder of a tech executive who's really well known in the community. And there's a lot happening right now on both sides of this argument. You have people who live in SF and they cringe when they hear anyone who doesn't live in SF make any critique. It's like one of those things where they're sort of afraid of criticism. And then you've got a whole bunch of people who believe that crime in SF is crazy. They visited once or twice. Their car was broken into, their luggage was stolen, you know, something happened, or they saw needles in the street. And so I thought, you know, wouldn't it be interesting if we dug into this, especially given the recent news that Bob Lee, the guy who was murdered about a week ago, maybe a little bit over a week ago, 10 days ago in San Francisco, was not actually a random, unprovoked murder at 2:30 in the morning. He knew the person who actually murdered him, who was arrested yesterday. I feel like I'm starting an episode to Crime Junkies, like the podcast where they go through an episode of yeah. And so, but it blew Twitter up. I mean, it blew Twitter up. I mean, everyone talking about like SF is unsafe. People who live there arguing that SF is safe. And I thought it'd be good for us to dive into, you know, some of the details behind SF crime and all that. But look, I think where we should actually start, given it's a podcast and everyone on podcasts is usually not an expert in a topic they talk about. You haven't been to SF in 5 years. What's your take on the city?
I mean, so I used to live there, you know, I lived there for years, and that's why I'm like 20% super weirdo and 80% kind of normal, is because of my San Francisco experience. Though I was the guy who lived in San Francisco and everybody else would be like, let's go to the North Beach Fair or let's go to the Marina Fair. And I'd be like, screw that. Let's go to the Folsom Street Fair. I want to see some weird stuff. If I'm going to be out eating a turkey leg, I want to be next to a guy with full leather chaps with his butt showing out. Like, that's what I was looking for. So that was my favorite part of San Francisco, is just going out to all the weird stuff, Castro Street Fair, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, what was the question?
What's your take on it now? Like, how do you feel? I mean, without having any sort of informed opinion on the city, just, you know, given that you see all the narrative on Twitter and the discourse. So how do you feel?
So when I read everything from people talking about the safety in San Francisco, or like what's going on and how bad it is or how good it is, I take everything with reminding myself that when I lived in San Francisco, like basically if you told residents of San Francisco in 2000, 2002, when I lived there, that the world ended at Gilroy, which is the next big city down from San Jose, like if you go past Gilroy, like you just fall off the side of the flat earth into nothingness. If you told people that, most San Franciscans and Bay Area people be like, yep, that's the way it works. Yeah, the world just ends when you get out of the Bay Area. And it's the most like navel gazing of any like region.
Oh, yeah.
And so every time I read everything coming from San Francisco, I realize that that is the character of the place, right? The people that live in Oakland, San Francisco, San Mateo, San Jose, like to them, the universe is relatively small and San Francisco is at the center of it. Now, that's one side of it. Like the people are going to make a bigger deal out of it because, you know, navel gazing. But the other side of it is you can't help but see like the open air drug markets going on and realize like, to me, like compassion can only go so far in terms of, you know, starting to have really negative externalities on the population as a whole. And for me, like really brought it home. I watched this video. I don't know if you saw this video, but they interviewed a guy who's a homeless guy. And he's in San Francisco and he says, oh yeah, this is great here. It's like the Mecca. It's the best place to go if you're homeless. They pay me $700 a month just to sleep on the sidewalk. And then they never mess with me. Like the police come by and just like ask me how I'm doing. And then he proceeded to explain how, you know, it's rough out here. And a couple teenagers came up and visited with him and they were looking for OxyContin. They wanted to buy OxyContin. And he's like, oh no, you shouldn't do that, guys. Let me coach you on how to buy fentanyl and shoot it up correctly. Like he just decided he was going to help the love he was receiving from San Francisco. He just decided he was going to create some fentanyl addicts out of the goodness of his heart, all for $20. And it was just like, what is going on here? Like, who thinks this is normal? And then like the reporter was like, you know, so tough that he's experiencing homelessness. I'm like, no, he's recruiting drug addicts. Like there's no experiencing there. He's creating drug addicts. So anyway, that's my whole thought about it. I haven't been there in 5 years, so I'm very educated.
Yeah. Well, I lived there up until recently, and then I moved to the great state of Texas. And, you know, I think the problem is you have two problems. One, right now, with everything going on and the murder of Bob Lee, you know, a lot of people took it as an opportunity to say crime is crazy and out of control, and your likelihood of getting murdered in San Francisco is higher than any city. And like they pointed to this before we actually had any facts about it, as to like a reason why San Francisco is unsafe and to build on that narrative. And a lot of the people who pointed at that were not San Francisco residents. The truth is that you are probably less likely to be murdered in San Francisco than the majority of other cities in the country. And the problem is not murder rates are extremely high in San Francisco. Problem is, like you mentioned, it is a mecca for people to go to and do drugs, even if it's illegal, sit on the street, take over a sidewalk, build a tent, live their life there happy and outside and with full access to drugs. And the psychotic nature that comes from doing fentanyl and abusing drugs over and over again leads to this state where you've got a lot of people who are not doing drugs and, you know, quote unquote normal. Then you have a larger than normal group of people who are in a psychotic state for however many hours a day it is. And they are, you know, and they're chasing you around, or they're sitting on the street, or they're yelling at the sky, and it gives this impression that the city is unsafe. And now the question is the city actually more unsafe than other cities? I think the answer is it depends on the crime that you're measuring, and it depends on how much crime you are measuring. Problem with San Francisco for the longest time now has been no one actually reports the crime because nothing's going to get done about it anyway. The people who probably have the most accurate numbers of property crime are the insurance companies, home insurance companies, car insurance companies. The police and the city of San Francisco are not reporting on numbers that are actually accurate and up to date. Because if your car gets broken into, are you actually going to call the police? Like maybe to file a police report so your insurance has it, but more than likely, you're just calling your insurance company and saying, hey, my car was broken into, window shattered, I got to get it fixed. And so when San Francisco politicians are saying crime is down over and over and over again, crime is just not reported. And that's the problem. And it gives this illusion, or at least the impression, that it is unsafe to live in San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you a side effect of all of it and the negative press that San Francisco's giving. Number one, like, did you just eat some pizza? I'm making a point here. Oh my God. I know,
my friends are also laughing at me.
The seagulls are laughing at you? They should. Yeah. Anyway, so, but like the negative publicity is so bad that the equivalent of all like the current laxity on property crime and stuff like that, like there's a Prop A here in San Antonio in the next election. And like the business community is terrified of this thing. Like they are terrified of like guests getting scared away, like the police not being able to do anything. And as a a father of two teenage boys who is entering the law and order phase of my parenthood, I'm like, yeah, like that sounds terrible. Like lock them up. Like, because frankly, like you run a real risk, like that a very small percentage of criminals, if not put away, can ruin an entire city. Like think about all those tweets we see where the people like go visit San Francisco and they're like a film crew and they go park their car in the arena, they run in the Starbucks and then they come back out and like everything they have is gone. And they were supposed to do like a movie in San Francisco about
and they had armed security. I mean, that's the crazy thing is like they actually hired private security and like still couldn't prevent the break-ins. And a lot of these are organized crime. I don't think it is. There's definitely this like weird narrative that people have who don't live in the Bay Area that like it's all the homeless people committing crimes, and like for the most part it's not. It's organized crime. It's these guys showing up in a car with license plates that they've swapped from another car or they stole the vehicle, and they know exactly how to smash and grab a car in under 5 seconds, take the stuff that's in the back and get away. And like I don't know how you prevent more of it or like how extreme you have to go, but like that to me seems like a very obvious thing to go after as organized crime units and have a task force dedicated to that. And then the second thing is like, we really shouldn't ever have a city in the US where it is legal as a drug dealer to be selling crimes or to be selling drugs in the street and get away with it and not be locked up. Like if you are actively selling fentanyl and dealing fentanyl and causing more people to get easy access to it, and it's very easy to find. If you want to go find these drug dealers, just go to fucking 8th and Market and look at the open air drug market and just like arrest the people who are dealing drugs. But they're not. They're actually like dealing the drugs across the street from the local police department office. It's absurd.
So back to my theme of being so fascinated by kind of the oddness of San Francisco. My last apartment when I lived there was down by the Metreon, so Fifth and Mission. And there were two things I remember happening all the time. One is my next door neighbor, who was this lovely guy, super sweet guy. I think his name was Dennis. Anyway, every morning I would come out and he'd be watering down our steps. Like we had steps that kind of adjoined each other in this loft area. And every morning he'd do it. And I'd just be like, hey, Dennis, what's going on? And I'm like 26. So I'm sleeping until like 9 every day. Like, kick it up. So Dennis would do it. And then one time Dennis went on vacation and I discovered why Dennis would do that every morning. And it was because there was several neighborhood homeless guys who used our front steps as their toilet every single night. And Dennis would be out there spraying it off just like it was part of the deal. So it's like, that's one of those things where it's like, well, like it kind of made sense, right? And like my other house was over by Haight-Ashbury, which was full of like transient homeless kids. And my sister came out to visit who lived in Austin, and she like recognized a couple of the kids. She's like, hey, I know you from 6th Street. Like, what are you doing here? And they were like, yeah, well, we move where the weather's best. We also move where the service is the best, which is the thing people don't understand about homelessness is homeless people are like finance bros. They go to where the action is. They go to where the best resources are. So they move in New York. But if you want to be like you want to get the best in homeless, do you know where you go? Like the easiest drugs, the easiest resources.
San Francisco.
They'll pay you to be on the street. You go to California.
Seattle, San Francisco, LA, Portland.
Because unfortunately, the more compassion you just give to these people, and some of them have no choice. I mean, that's just the reality. You have the mentally infirm, you have the people there by choice, and you have the drug addicts. Like those are, and some combination thereof, of people who the world has let down. But it's a situation where like they said they came to San Francisco because it was the best. They had resources, tons of resources there in Haight-Ashbury, and it was like great weather. We get out of Texas when it's hot, and we come up here. We spend a couple weeks getting here, and then we're here. Food, games, fun, easy drugs, and then we just go back to the next place. It's fascinating.
I mean, and it's this like trickle down effect, right? If you have easy access to drugs and you inherently create more drug addicts, you're going to have more people who are on the streets, who one move to California to get access to the drugs, and then two end up on the streets because they can't afford rent there. Like it is crazy and out of control. And then they end up, defecating on the street or peeing on the street or shooting up on the street. And like it's so weird. Cause like for me, I moved from Florida originally when I had moved to San Francisco the first time. And I had no idea. I ended up moving to sixth and Folsom. If you're, pretty close to where you were living. Yeah. And I didn't know at the time. I moved into an apartment building called Maso. And I remember, I went for a walk the very first night that I moved there with my dog, and I walked, the wrong way. I walked towards 7th, 8th, and then actually like up into the Tenderloin. And I remember just being like, where the fuck am I? Like, I'm going to get stabbed here right now. And then it took me some time to like register this as a kid who kind of grew up in rural-ish Florida and South Florida, and or suburbia, Haven, whatever you want to call it. And then the second story was like a few months later. I never really knew that like people pooping on the streets was a real thing. And in my building, we had this dog park. It was on the street level in between two streets, and it was open, so like anyone could go there. It was an open park. And I remember seeing a guy in a full suit, like dressed top to bottom. It was raining outside. He was wearing a full suit. He had an umbrella. It was lightly drizzling. And he walks into the park, and he doesn't have a dog. And he goes into the bushes, and he turns around, and he takes his trousers down from his suit, and he just shits. First he opens his umbrella, fully open so that he's protecting himself in privacy. And then he just starts taking a shit in a full suit at like 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And I remember like I was walking my dog, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever seen someone take a poop on the streets, like in real life. And I remember yelling at him and being like, bro, what are you like there was some profanity there. Like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he just like replies back, well, where else am I going to go? And I was like, not here, not in a dog park. Like this looks like not. And I guess it kind of makes sense if you want to pretend like your poop is just dog poop that an owner never cleaned up. But it was probably like the most like sobering experience for me moving to San Francisco the very first time as sort of this like naive kid from Florida. So, and it's just a thing like it. Look at me now. I'm back in Florida on a balcony.
A worldly man of the world back in Jacksonville, Florida, doing a podcast.
I know. But like, that's the thing is I don't understand how everyone in the Bay Area has become desensitized to this thing. Like, how is it normal for these things to happen? And I know a lot of the residents don't believe it's normal. They don't want to walk out and see this on the street and walk over. A lot of the times people end up walking over dead bodies from people who have overdosed on the side of the road. Like, that is not normal. And yet somehow you've got politicians who say, we need to show compassion. We need to make it so that they can shoot up cleanly. The problem is that they don't have like safe areas to shoot up. And it's like, no, that's not the problem. They need forced rehab. You should give everyone housing, but force rehab. Don't allow drugs to be flowing free in San Francisco. Like, don't let people die because you think you're being progressive and showing empathy towards drug addicts. Like, you have to help them become not drug addicts. And if they don't want to do that, they should move to another place where they can shoot up legally. And that shouldn't be San Francisco or LA or any other big city for what it's worth. It shouldn't be any city in the US for what it's worth. Anyway, like I think for whatever reason, I don't know how it gets better in that regard because the politicians don't seem to be wanting to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, you have a standard thing where it's like issues either become ones where we actively try to fix it, or it gets co-opted to a place where politicians use it to benefit themselves, right? And the game stays broken in order to make sure the money keeps flowing and the prestige and power and influence keep flowing. So, that's unfortunately where the drug war is right now, which unfortunately, like it's a bad thing to call it a war. It's just like, we shouldn't have a war on drugs, like, because there's a big part of it that's like a mental health problem, and there's a big part of it that's a psychological problem, and there's a big part of it that's an affordability problem. Those are all components of it. But unfortunately, it's ended up in a place where I think San Francisco's there now, where the local politicians are using it as a touchstone to argue about and further themselves. Yeah. Nationally, it's definitely that way. I mean, we all know what the solutions are, just nobody really wants to do them.
No. Well, it's not progressive. It's not the liberal progressive thing to do. It's the, to actually solve the problem. The progressive thing is to be, we've got a tent that you can go shoot up in if you want to have a safe space to shoot up. And, I don't know if the actual crime and the feeling unsafe outside of a few areas in San Francisco is actually due to homelessness or due to poverty or due to drug dealing. The problem is the organized crime and a lot of the property theft. So like auto break-ins, home burglaries. And like I pulled up, there's stats from the Hoover Institute. San Franciscans face about a 1 in 16 chance each year of being a victim of property or violent crime, which makes the city more dangerous than 98% of U.S. cities, both small and large. To put this into perspective, Compton, California, the infamous home of drug gang turf wars, and which today remains more dangerous than 90% of all US cities, is almost twice as safe as San Francisco. And like, that might just be from reported data. I didn't look into this into the actual numbers that were reported there, but like, again, you have all this underreporting because people know that the police has been severely defunded there or underfunded. I think they only have like 500 or 600 police officers for the entire city. They're not going to respond to sort of the low level cases of your, something being stolen out of your garage, your car being broken into. And so that's probably even underreported. And I think that's what makes people feel unsafe. There really isn't anywhere else that I've been to besides several cities in California where you can't leave anything in your car without risk of it being broken into within minutes of leaving it. Like I can't think of anywhere else I've traveled to. I've been down to Mexico City. I've been to a bunch of other countries, and like it is the only place where we actively would park our car and say you can't have a USB phone wire sticking out of the front console because someone will break in and steal it. And like that is not normal either.
Sorry, I was about to. I've in the course of that conversation before you took a bite of the pizza, I was like, "Oh, here's two tangents I totally want to talk about," but neither one of them relates to San Francisco crime and what's due about it. But anyway, I'll keep us on topic.
Well, let's move on. I mean, we've talked about it. I think, I think like the ultimate reality is that, and the harsh truth is, you are no more likely to get murdered in San Francisco than Austin or in Miami or in New York. Like this murder and the homicide that of Bob Lee that everyone was using to spin a narrative that like SF is unsafe was just the wrong data point to draw to a larger narrative that like you're more likely to get murdered in San Francisco. Like as a city, relatively, when it comes to murders, is like a pretty safe place to live. When it comes to auto theft, home invasions, property crime, all that stuff, like you are more likely to get punched in the head by a crazy person or your car getting broken into by organized crime than most other cities in the US. And like that is this thing where people, if you criticize it as an outsider, like the only defense that people have is like, you don't live here, like how do you know? I feel safe. And then or like the data shows that that's not correct, which the data is underreported. Yeah. And like, yeah, sure, you live at the top of the hill, like they don't want to make their way all the way up to the top of the hill. It's pretty high. But and so like that's I don't know how it gets better. I think, I wouldn't want to raise kids in San Francisco. That was a big reason for us moving. Like we really wanted to love it. Love the Bay Area generally. And unfortunately it's just, I think until it gets better, it's not my fight to fight. So that's my final take. We can move on to your tangents about non-San Francisco related things.
Well, I was actually pulling up the numbers on murder because you're right? You can't trust because petty crime isn't always reported. It's like, why bother? But you're much worse off to be in a lot of other cities if you don't want to be murdered. St. Louis, Missouri, and Baltimore, Maryland. But it's also the idea there. Murder is a tough proxy as well because murder is not evenly distributed. The people in Pack Heights, that's a big deal. The people in Oakland, totally different story, right? In terms of murder rate in each of those individual places. But it is interesting if you go look at like the reported murder rates in some of these big cities. San Francisco doesn't actually report data.
Oh, interesting.
They're one of the cities that just refuses because it's progressive.
So who knows?
It's got to be fixing. It's got to be fixing itself.
But there's only been 13 this year. I think there's been 13 homicides in 2023. I mean, if you compare that, if you start looking up other big cities, they're going to have, or even like small to mid-sized cities, because San Francisco by population is not that big. They're going to have fewer than other cities. And I think that's sort of the piece that's lost on a lot of people is the murder rate's not that high. Now, granted, yeah, it's hard to measure murder rate as a proxy for safety because when you're in Baltimore, there's really nice areas and there's areas that you just don't go to. A lot of that murder rate is localized across, individual communities or gangs that are fighting each other. It's not like that. There needs to be this sort of like metric for as a random targeted individual citizen, how likely am I to get murdered in a city? And I'm not sure that benchmark exists or if it has, I've never seen it. I've also only done 5 minutes of research before this podcast. So.
It shows, yes. That's why, you wanted to talk about this. I was like, I don't know. I haven't even been to San Francisco in 5 years. I have no idea. Even then, all I saw was I couldn't get a hotel room for less than $500 a night. I was like, why am I here? This is so dumb.
Should we talk about our name change? Our potential name change?
Sure. Yeah, we could do that. I have some other tangents, and then I don't know how long you want to go today, but we're 25 minutes in, so
Maybe
you
5
got
more
mad
minutes.
at me
Does
and
that
Chris
work?
for doing 50 minutes on Venture Studios the other day.
It's just long, but I also do have to jump in 5 minutes. So why don't we try to end it at 30 today? For everyone listening, we are exploring changing the name to This Is Fine after the meme where the little dog is sitting in the house that's on fire and he's just sitting there patiently holding his cup saying this is fine. And that's great because that's the state of the world right now. And then fine, as Chris amazingly pointed out, can stand, in our case, it stands for fraud, investments, news, and everything else, because that's what we cover on the podcast. A lot of
I think
fraud.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, that was good. I don't know how he comes up with this stuff, and it blows my mind.
We talked about, you guys are both, I think, geniuses of, but you have different geniuses, right? You're geniuses of communication, but you both have different geniuses of insight. And like the way I explained it to Chris was, and you may have heard this if you listen to the episode, so I'll repeat
Which
it.
one? Last one or the one before?
The last one. Well,
Okay,
like
I just started.
Chris's batting average is incredibly high. Like 8 out of 10 are total bangers, but like your tweet slugging percentage is incredible. Like he's never done the Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel of the chicken in the pot, right? Chicken in the coffee pot. Like he's never done that. Never done that. And like, that's okay. Like but it's just beautiful how the geniuses I think are different.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate about both of you guys.
I've got a few, what I would call my Mona Lisas for sure. Trolling everyone that I was the badge access employee at Twitter, and then Elon had to get back into the office is top of my list for sure.
Absolutely.
Trolling everyone that I cooked chicken in a coffee pot to save money for my company while I was traveling for work. Like, it's funny because that became like my reputation on LinkedIn. Everyone knows me as the chicken pot coffee guy, and it was funny because it blew up the internet in a way that I've never seen before in my life. Like there were Reddit posts, like hundreds of popular Reddit posts where it was top of the subreddit,
Right.
and people were just so mad. They were like, this guy is a bootlicker. Like his company doesn't need him to save money. That's what, this guy is so dumb for he's going to give the next person salmonella. The cleaning staff is, and I'm like, it was the first time I really realized that sarcasm is truly lost on the internet without a sarcasm tag or satire.
Even if you did it in video form, most people would still not get it because they are so dense. Like it is, the reading comprehension level on the internet is even worse than I'd imagined.
Well, people want a
horrific.
reason to get mad. They want something to get mad over. And that's what I realized when I started going viral on the internet. I was like, I can give people a reason to get mad in a way that, like, it's very clear line. You either know it's satire or you get really mad over it. And that was kind of my area of genius when I was writing a lot of these posts, was like, I know what I can write, where half the people are going to say, that's funny, I get it, and they like it. And the other half of the people are going to get outraged at me.
Whatever. They're still Anons, and not one of them is in Jacksonville because they're all in San Francisco because they think it's the center of the universe.
I guarantee.
Dude, next week we got to definitely talk about Billy McFarland from Fire Festival.
Yeah.
Like,
speaking of fraud,
he's such the greatest unheralded corner of Twitter, and nobody's engaging with him. No, nothing. He hasn't blocked me yet.
I don't want to give him the publicity.
Is he a bad guy? He's a bad guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe he should come on the pod and we can argue him about his fraud. I'm happy, Billy, if you're listening, I don't know, maybe you don't have anything better else to do with your time, like Fire Festival 2. But if you are listening, come on the pod and we'll argue your fraud. I watched the Netflix documentary. I'm caught up.
Maybe we should take the pod there and only bring on frauds. Like
to Netflix or Fire Festival.
Let them do their thing.
That would be great, to interview fraudsters like years after the fact. That would be kind of fun. Anyway,
or during the fraud. Why the hell not? Like, I mean,
yeah, SBF would have admitted to it.
Clear frauds out there. We got like Grant Cardone and
don't say that. We're gonna get attacked by the sales bros.
I mean, it's one of those things where somebody can have a great message and not be a good person. Like it's really fascinating to me. And like my greatest version of that was like, I was a young man. It was like I was just dating my wife. We were in Australia, and like my wife and I are there, and I see this guy who's just like has a giant head, like just built like a linebacker, these giant hands, and he's got an American accent in the middle of Australia. We're like in Brisbane, near Brisbane or something. And he's just like screaming at this petite, like very beautiful blonde American woman. And he's maybe 10 years older than us. And he's just like screaming at her and then like follows her in the store, like doing all this thing. And then I turned to my wife. I was like, you know who that is? It's Tony Robbins. Like he's just like screaming at this woman who's his girlfriend or wife or whatever.
That checks out.
And I'm like, oh, like checks out.
Yeah,
like,
that doesn't shock me at all. If you told me, that guy did bad things, I would be like, yeah, not like if he made Forbes 30 under 30, not shocked. Like then committed fraud, not shocked. So let's do next episode on Billy McFarland. That'd be fun.
I was about to give a rant about piety, but anyway, that sounds good. Okay, we'll stop here. All right, cool. All right, talk to you next week.